Hello and welcome to Discussing New Approaches. This is the show where I sit down with interesting people in AI, data and technology. And my name is walker-rawson and I am your host and founder of Talos Executive Search. I might be looking a little bit tired, maybe even a little bit haggard, but that's because me and my wife are dealing with a 4.5-month-old baby who is going through her first sleep regression. So yeah, sleep is a distant memory to me, unfortunately. But I'm joined in the studio by André Skepple, who is the founder and CEO of FullSpektrum. Thank you for joining me today, André.
Pleasure to be here, and I've lived that life, so trust me. It ain't going to stop for a while, but, you know, it's all about better purpose.
It is, yeah. I mean, loving it. Just a little bit more sleep before doing things like this would be ideal. But so obviously the topic we're going to approach today is how can we use AI to help support and ultimately enhance neurodivergent individuals? So I know this is quite an important topic to you. It's very tied into your journey. So did you want to start off by giving a little bit of an overview about, what was the journey that led you to start FullSpektrum and to build, is it Achille, yeah, perfect.
So my journey is quite well versed in other contents and everything I've done, but I'll give you the more abridged version. So I'm neurodivergent myself. I have been diagnosed with dyslexia and severe dyspraxia. My diagnosis came through in late my second year university. After essentially showcasing a small lifetime of hurdles that I kept on approaching within my learning and development. So the story goes, I was a late developer, so I started walking and talking quite late. And because of my developmental delays in the late 80s, early 90s, I was assessed by a speech therapist and various different elements of child and mental health services within Lambeth. And so they put me into a special needs nursery. And I was there from, I think I was about 2 years old and just turning 3. And it was at that point where I wasn't really speaking properly, I wasn't really walking. And then all of a sudden my development just upturned. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And so they gave me an IQ test. And I had an IQ test and my IQ was 120. Like, let's put him back into mainstream. Because obviously at the time, there wasn't really as much research or knowledge within elements of neurodiversity. In fact, neurodiversity wasn't even a concept back then. And so, in looking through my reports, they basically had me down as clumsy child syndrome, which now is known as dyslexia, developmental coordination disorder. And so I went through school being an overachiever, but also not just an overachiever, but there was also elements of education that was still kind of unmapped, but it was masked because of how elaborate my, engagement was in classes, the effort I put in my lessons and so on and so forth. But I never was that student that got the A stars. I would get like the Bs and the As and most times the Cs as kind of spread out, but not reach the goal of what people would do, and especially with the effort I put in. And so for the longest time, my mum kept on advocating to my teachers, especially in secondary school, that, I think André has special needs and needs that additional support. And they was like, no, André's an opposite, he's fine. Basically, they were pretty satisfied with my attainment, but my mum always knew that the effort I put in and the potential I had was never really showcased. And so it all came to a head when I transitioned from secondary school and went into sixth form college, and I went to one of the top sixth form colleges in London, with the intention of studying medicine. And so, as you know, when you study medicine, you have to have A's and B's. You have pretty much flawless grades in a very archetypal curriculum. And I failed multiple times. Like I got U's, I got E's, I got the highest grade I got at the time was in AS computing. I got a C, and in the sixth form college I was in, they wouldn't allow me to progress in all but one of my courses. But because I was always a good student and helped out, they're like, we still want to stay, but you can do an advanced vocational certificate in science. But the modules clashed with A2 computing, so you won't be able to do the one A level they actually did good at. So I had to leave. And so that kind of started the whole awakening of something's wrong. Why is it that I'm putting so much effort into my work and that effort is not paid in terms of the outcomes? But at the same time, when I help other people with their study preparation and kind of like tutor them and all this things there, they always got better grades than me. That didn't make sense. So it got to the point where I had to fight really hard to get an assessment done, get that additional support. And then luckily, simply because there's a loophole in universities where I did an application on my UCAS that said I had a disability. And so there's something called the Disability Support Allowance, where students going into university education, if they are assessed and they need that support, you get money, you get like a laptop, you get all these tools like a dictaphone and software, extra time in your exam, special arrangements, special accommodations to help kind of narrow the gap that is in accordance to your disability. And so I got all that. And did it help? Not really. Like, maybe a little bit. I mean, look, one of the key things I needed was that additional learning support. Now, I did a science-based degree. I did a human biology degree. They sent me a learning support assistant with a theology background. So when I sat with her, they're like, can you now explain to me all these terms so I can help you to learn? I thought, this is nonsense. Like, what's the point? And at the time, I started realizing that a lot of people was going through very similar issues. If it's not getting the right support at the right time, it's not getting support at all. It's whether if they're misdiagnosed, late diagnosed, or not diagnosed at all. And it's a lot of people. And the numbers really kind of told the tale where I was the lucky one, especially being a young black male growing up in South London, council estate, single parent family, free school meals, all that. Those socioeconomic elements meant that I was more likely not to end up in jail with some sort of mental health problem, an addiction, or dead. And even if you look deeper, if you go into the prison system, about 77% of inmates from Afro-Caribbean background are actually neurodivergent or even illiterate completely. So there's a core root cause that is allowing this accelerated pipeline from school to prison, but also those in the school system that have pretty solid backgrounds of support around them, they're never really achieving what they can get. And so the small number that do get the right support at the right time, the right environment that unlocks their true potential, they excel to be some of the best of us. They're the ones, they're the innovators, they're the leaders, they're the ones that are more elaborate. They're the ones like Richard Branson, who we all know is neurodivergent, and there's so many others that are out there. What's causing this gap? So now seeing this and now living this and now experiencing and able to articulate the hurdles that I came across, I said to myself, I have to do something about it. And even though, yes, I fought very hard to get my degree, and then I did my master's, and that was my experience becoming a scientist. So I was a scientist for a bit, specialised in applied microbiology, particularly in diagnostics, developing platforms to rapidly detect and quantify like bacteria and everything like that within laboratory or field settings. And then I worked for a number of years within life sciences as a business development specialist, so consulting with pharmaceutical companies, with research institutions, top universities in the world, big corporations like the GSKs and AstraZenecas and so on and so forth. And I got to travel the world as well. And through all those experiences, I realized more and more, number one, I've had to retrofit myself in a space that forces me to conform, but doesn't give me the pathway to where my potential is. Number two, these are real hurdles that are not just limited to education. It's in all aspects of life. So how am I able to get the right support to showcase my true value? And number three, I'm not the only one. There's many more. There's 1 in 5 people are known to be neurodivergent. That's 20% of the population of what we know. So how do we support that? So when I became a father, literally as I was in the maternity ward waiting for my son to be born, like he was induced, I said to myself, I've got all these ideas. I've got to do something. I've got to build something. I've got to leave something for him. And so I built FullSpektrum. And initially what that was meant to be a big middle finger up to the national curriculum to say that, look, you tried to fail me. You didn't fail me, but you made it incredibly difficult. And even still, my true value was not really realized until now. But you're not going to do it to my son. You're not going to do it to his peers. So I'm going to build something that's going to change the whole system for it to be pupil-led and person-centered.
So again, you can see that why that's a personal journey for you, because it's sort of rife with the things that shaped you to what you want to make now, which is really important. I suppose, what were some of the individual challenges that you had? So you mentioned all of those challenges you had to face throughout your journey. I suppose from a personal perspective, maybe more day to day, what were the things that you were coming up against just on a daily basis? Because I think a lot of those might resonate with people.
one of the main issues I've always had, and it's something I've been working on quite proactively and in a very different way, which obviously we'll talk about later on, it was more based on my executive functioning. So how do I manage time? How do I manage tasks, allocation of tasks, delegation of tasks, acceptance of tasks, but also things such as short-term memory, approaches to learning. I mean, look, I'm 38. I'm going to be 39 this year. So I went through the curriculum at a point when it was quite traditional before it started to go a bit evolved as it is now. And at the time, there was always one way of learning, which is passive. You sit in the classroom and you direct your learning from a teacher to the student. I'm meant to pick it up, I'm meant to memorize, and essentially it's a regurgitation of interpretation of knowledge rather than the application of knowledge. Now, in the national curriculum, we're not really taught and embrace the application of knowledge. It's always about the retainment. Take the RE out, it's attainment. That is what the curriculum is focused on. And so for me, the main hurdles was retainment of knowledge has impacted my attainment, but my potential has always been the application of it. My potential was always discovery, analyze things, and through that independent research, analysis, and interpretation of that knowledge, therefore hypothesizing things, how to demonstrate those hypotheses into projects, into elements of research, experiments, build things, innovate things. And so I've never had hurdles in innovation. It's just that I never was really in the rooms to innovate until I got into research. And when I got into research, that's when I realized what my superpowers could be. But again, you have to kind of work yourself up. So now, as an entrepreneur, my whole day-to-day life is an experiment. I do experiments now. I'm even doing an experiment right now, without even realizing it. Like, these are all things that I can do because I have unlocked myself to be able to interpret the world as a dynamic equation. There is a certain framework to things, but there are a plethora of variables that people like me have to interpret and factor into this equation. So there are clear solutions, clear outcomes, clear progression that is put into it, and me being one of the many leaders out there that had to push it through. So yeah, to summarize, my executive function hurdles are every single day. And it's not limited to work, it's also limited to general life, relationships in particular. You know, I've now built tools that help me to build better relationships, because rather than overthink and over-engineer concepts, particularly ones of a romantic nature, it can create an unnecessary discord when it comes to relationships, and I've experienced that myself. And it's mainly down to self-development. You know, many people like me are very, very, very brilliant people, but when we are focused on something that we love doing and it turns to a hyper-focus, there's always an imbalance. And that imbalance is how much of yourself do you invest into, so that the work that you're doing, that you're passionate and focused on doing, gets the best out of you. And so the biggest hurdle that I've had was that self-care, was that ability to take a step back, take a deep breath, assess and analyze things holistically, and to regulate. Because people like me, I call the weirdos, we very frequently dysregulate, whether if it's through overstimulation, overexertion, overcommitment, and not understanding that there's a benefit of compromise, because our inhibition to discern what we can do is limited because our minds are so fast and so deep and process things granular, but we're living in a digital world that expects you to be analog, and there's incompatibility. This is where people like me are the ones to create the solutions that we're doing to kind of, you know, arrest that decline.
Does it have to come from sort of people like you, you know, people neurodivergent? Do you think neurodivergent people have to create neurodivergent solutions almost?
I would say yes. And the reason being is because, and let me take a step back. So I have a particular comment, a theoretical statement that I make when I talk about the subject quite a lot. I'd always put a disclaimer to say I don't think everyone's going to agree with it, because it does disrupt the notion of what neurodiversity is, because what I find now, one of the things I'm getting quite distasteful of is neurodiversity is one of the most trending topics discussed, not just on social media, but across society itself, because of this emergence of the topic and people realizing these hurdles and how these hurdles can be positively, identified as their strengths. But it's now doing the thing that diversity, equity, inclusion always does, is creating groups and groups of people that feel superior within a notion of inferiority. And so one of the things that I say is everybody's neurodivergent. I don't believe neurotypical elements exist, because if you look at the term neurodiversity, is essentially that mapped variability of how our nervous system is developed and how it's adaptive. And most of our elements is not just inherited through, genes, how we inherit a particular disease or a particular element of us through your children and so on and so forth. Many of these things are through environmental, they're variable. So the fact that we've got our own pathways of experience, our own stories, our own experiences that coincide in terms of how our neurological development can unfold and differentiate, then we're all neurodivergent. We need to stop creating these groups and barriers and start to actually look at the definitive factor, which is us. And so when I say the neurodivergents are the ones to build these, what I'm saying is everyone should be building these. But we have to look at the whole framework of society, the whole framework of innovation, business, commerce, leadership, education. We need to stop looking at things in a very antiquated notion of hierarchy and look at things as attribution. Everyone has a contributing factor to this. Everyone is involved. Everyone should be invited to innovate. And so the platforms that we're building has that element of attribution built in, where the intelligence, the insights that we're gathering and developing as products, as a solution, it's not just from us. We're just enabling everyone to participate. That participation is what feeds in and makes it better, more inclusive, more adaptive, dynamic, more of a representation of society, more representation of human development.
Mm. And we're sort of getting into the data elements that I think we want to touch upon a little bit later, but I think I can encapsulate that almost with sort of diversity of thought, making the product better, which then I suppose feeds into training data and to AI, which is a natural segue. So obviously you started FullSpektrum, you've changed your focus a little bit, because obviously, like we've discussed before, you were focused a little bit more on SEN to begin with, like you mentioned in your journey. But that's changed slightly, and you've embraced the AI side a little bit more. So it'd be great to talk a little bit about those sort of AI solutions.
The transition from focusing on special education needs and disabilities to what I call neuroinclusion and AI fostered, AI aided neuroinclusion was strategic, because not a lot of people know this, but when I first came up with the concept of FullSpektrum, I came up with a concept that never was really illustrated until recently, a concept I coined as support intelligence. So, people like me of all ages, we have these hurdles to overcome. And I always knew FullSpektrum will go the way of AI, what I didn't foresee. And I'm grateful, I'm actually blessed to have the advice and the guidance through one of my mentors, who's actually one of the world-leading AI experts in this, is that, we need to build intelligence that is trained by our experiences, good and bad, in order for us to utilize this in the most impactful way. And so it was always my intention to build FullSpektrum, initially focused on SEND, because the way I saw it at the time was, number one, SEND is and was it was a burning issue. In fact, we identified this as an issue before it became a publicly known issue. And it's simply because back then, 2016, 2017, before I incorporated the company, I had all these ideas. I met with a friend of my stepbrother who worked at the Department of Education. I basically just had a very unstructured conversation where I was just reading and ranting for all these ideas that I had. That basically was a very unrefined articulation of the support intelligence concept. And basically, the one thing he said was, if you can develop a solution for SEND, for special educational needs, there's going to be a lot of money made available in the coming years to basically take on solutions that can address this problem. Because quite frankly, we've done everything that we can to try to arrest this decline, and we have no ideas. We haven't got a single clue. His true words were more colourful, to which I'm not sure you allow colourful language on this podcast, so I'll kind of stay away from it. But essentially, they knew the system was broken and it was going to get worse, and there was no prospects for it getting better. And funny enough, 6-7 years since, here we are now. It's one of the biggest issues facing local and national government today. But because it's such an issue, and not just in terms of the lack of outcomes being achieved, not just the turmoil that parents have to go through, literally fighting for an education for their child, when the law, the statutes showcase it should be there, the money should be there, the support should be there, the expertise should be there. It's not. And so many of these issues tend to be ring-fenced around the notion of finance and the lack of it. And what I've always said is, it's a financial issue, not because there's a limited number of finance, it's because of how mismanaged it is. You're not looking at things efficiently. You're trying to control something that shouldn't be controlled in a way where the value is distorted. And so because this has been an ongoing issue, and we've spoken to many local authorities, I've had meetings with so many directors of service, so many special educational needs coordinators, we call SENCOs, with case officers, with ministers. We even went to Parliament and lobbied for a bill for reforming how children with autism receive the support by actually making it a mandatory requirement for all teachers to be trained in autism identification and support as part of their teacher training. We went through the whole thing. We even met with one of the former education secretaries, Gillian Keegan. We did all that. But as much as we could engage with all those that are either benefactors of the system, policymakers of the system, or the professionals that are there to deliver it, we just couldn't make the issue. And so disappointingly, we had a solution that was designed, and everyone that we spoke to said, we would like to have this, but no one was willing to pay for it. And so if you want to build a business, and a business that is designed to showcase traction, is designed to utilize revenue to show that you can actually sustain this business and grow and go through those gears and those milestones of development like any other tech company can, then you should. But we couldn't. And so we had to make that move. We had to kind of look at this as a wider picture, but also to not to over-index into the issues of the system, because they're quite well pronounced. The strategic pivot was because the technology now does not rely on us feeding into enterprise data sources to train these models of information that only local governments, schools, and institutional elements could provide. We now can build and harness this technology on us. We don't need them anymore. We need to go straight to us, because we are the ones that need it. We're the ones that have that sovereignty over it if we can take the decision on. We're the ones that can place a value on it. We're the ones that will pay for it.
Straight to source.
Straight to source, straight to consumer, and also straight to business. We also are talking to, corporates, we're also talking to various enterprise level elements to say that these solutions not only are designed to improve the individual, but if you collectively and strategically implement this to your workforce, the gains you get in your company are significant. And not only that, through the art of business intelligence, off the back of the support intelligence that we're gaining, we can also provide insights in terms of how to model, forecast, and to integrate these insights into how your company evolves. There's a plethora of different positive outcomes and benefits from this. So we had to move. And it's not to say that we're not going to tackle the SEND issue. We are. I am. And I do it very discreetly. But the key thing now is, whereas the model was to go from the top down, it's reversed. It's to go up. But if there's any opportunities to go top down or middle out, we will always go for them. We now have a very agile business model that is designed to coincide with any and every opportunity that is there, but we pragmatically review and overcome any barriers to entry by looking at the most penetrable sources of implementation, of engagement, of conversion from interest into revenue, so that we have to be a business, because without the business, we cannot fulfill our impact.
And I suppose it's linking back to what you were saying earlier, where with your own pain points in that process, it's almost going, like you said, directly back to source, trying to help those people because they're going to be the people in need. You know, if you've got a mother who has tried everything, you know, tried to get support, tried to get funding, or maybe even has money, but doesn't know where to put it in order to have that support, this is something that's widely available, then that could be quite revolutionary, I'd imagine.
It'll be, and also it'll be something. I mean, we designed a solution to work with the day-to-day person, young professionals, creatives, founders, anyone that is either aware of the neurodivergence or is unaware and just needs to be effectively a high performer. So the strategy was always to say that, look, let everyone use this. And through the experience of using this, they can then see, especially if they're a parent, how this solution can benefit their child. So that coercion of, you know, let's get into my son, my daughter, or my niece, or my nephew, or whoever else, it kind of fosters that whole I am because we are type narrative, which is what I fundamentally not just build a company on, it's one of my core values. It's very traditional African value under the concept of Ubuntu. You know, which is actually, funny enough, it's an operating system, and so
maybe explain that a little bit, because obviously there's probably people out there who don't know, including myself. Who don't have
yeah, sure. So Ubuntu is an operating system under the Linux category. It's an operating system that was developed by a company called Red Hat, and Red Hat are the ones that design various programming languages and everything else like that through the art of open source. And so open source development is one of the most remarkable ways of developing solutions in a very lean way, but actually invites other developers to contribute towards making something better without the need of ring fencing, intellectual property and ownership and everything else like that. And so a lot of solutions we see today, especially in AI, they're built open source because they've allowed their code to be available to say, look, we'll make money from this, but we make money from the services, not of the ownership of the IP.
And that comes from my academic sort of point.
It does, yeah. It's a very, again, going back to one of the words I mentioned in the beginning, attribution. It's coined off that concept. Everyone's attributed to contribute to this to make it better. And so, again, it's one of the most potent ways of building not just software, digital products, but building anything, because it's all for a whole peer-reviewed, collective, collaborative element. You know, there's two traditional principles within the Swahili region of Africa that I coin to everything I do. Cooperative economics, which is a term, the Swahili term that is coined called Ujamaa, and collective work and responsibility, which is a term called Ujima. And so those two over so many others that exist, these are the things that I see as the bedrocks of building a better society. And if I'm going to align with those principles and values as a business owner, as an innovator, it has to be, you know, an alignment to that, because essentially the differentiator for us as a company is not just that, yes, we're building a vastly superior system and yes, it's built with the people and built with that whole attribution element in mind. Our principles, our philosophy as a company is very much determined, and therefore it dictates every little thing we do. And I think that's one of the things I went wrong. This is my third attempt in building this venture. The two other occasions of building this, it's kind of like learning and developing as I went along in this journey, especially as a neurodivergent person with very limited experience and various different things. And literally just the only thing that kind of got me going was my optimism, dare I say delusion, but also the resilience, knowing that I can enter into so many different risk areas and not be risk adverse and learn from those mistakes and kind of build myself better and so on and so forth. So the thing now that differentiates this version compared to the previous other two attempts is having a philosophy detailed, anchored and descriptive that determines everything we do and differentiates us to everybody else. And not a case of differentiate us as a competitive advantage, but say, look, we're doing it this way. I suggest you do it this way and work with us or to follow us, because this is the way that society is going to benefit. Society is really in a broken stage at the moment, the way I see it, because it misses these principles, it misses these philosophies. So let me not just talk it, let me walk it, let me show it, let me build it, and let everyone prosper from the products that we build.
And build almost sort of community around it as well, which is, again, a really interesting concept. I think, so bringing it back to technology before we get further into that, I suppose why have sort of previous digital systems, technology systems failed neurodivergent people?
They only look at one thing. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's always good, especially one of the key elements of building a business is to, find or build your minimum viable proposition, your MVP. And it's got to be very focused, very distilled to a very simplistic element that you use and get out there to market, and then you kind of build and scaffold it back there. And it's what we're doing. But the issue is that a lot of people in the space that build solutions, they've built solutions. It's what I call vibe coding. You think it's a good idea because you realize that, oh, you got ADHD, so do I. You got these problems, so do I. But they haven't really listened to not just the diversity of problems, but haven't looked at the root cause. So a lot of the products in this space, especially there's an explosion of ADHD coaches and solutions and all these things that you see on Instagram all the time. It's because those concerns are superficial. People talk about in terms of that get dopamine hit, which is why you got so many people who are doom scrolling on Instagram and various other social media feeds, because it gives them that hit, it gives them that buzz. It exacerbates conditions like ADHD because of the biochemical dysregulation that's happening subdermally within us, And so because it's always focused on superficial elements and a single superficial element rather than looking at things in a holistic but granular element, so that longitudinal and latitudinal, conceptualization of it. They don't see it as we're going to build an ecosystem. We're just going to build an app. People say, oh, what's your app? What's your app? What's your app? I don't say we're building an app. I say we're building a platform. And a platform designed to create an ecosystem. It's a platform. And I critically say a platform because it's designed for others to build better solutions off of it by putting them into the center of it. And that's what people haven't done. Maybe it's because they haven't understood fully the capabilities of AI. Maybe they haven't understood fully in terms of how agentic workflows work, where rather than think of, oh, we've got to build this bot to do that and build that bot, I say, no, scrap the technology. Think of building a service. If you're going to build a service, you're going to have people, you're going to recruit people that do certain tasks and roles to fulfill a collective outcome, an objective, the goal. So you identify the goal, you identify the people that are there, identify the problem you're trying to solve. You look at in terms of the processes that are needed to work to build a solution and the processes that are problematic to try to obviously alleviate and innovate off the back of it. And you look at the parameters. So one of the things that I did and what I kind of fed into this version of the company and what I've also used to spin off and build my own, so I've got a business and AI consultancy on the side that is kind of called Advanced Thinking. And one of the things that I built was called the 5P framework, which is basically problem, people, processes, parameters, and purpose. So if you can build a logic model that looks at those 5Ps as essential criteria of building something or figuring out something or achieving an objective, making impact, then you'll have an impactful solution. These other solutions, they don't think of holistic modeling like this. They don't embrace advanced thinking. They just look at, this is something that I think everyone else will have because you experienced it. Have you tested it? Okay, you've tested it. Okay, have you dug deep in that testing? Have you thought of in terms of how you can prepare yourself to build on other elements? Have you thought of what the goal is, and not just the goal in the short or long term, but as milestones? Have you really applied your advanced thinking towards this? So I think this is where what we're building within Achille in this newly modeled version of FullSpektrum is going to work. And it already is working. with very little resource, because we've applied that integration of design thinking and critical interpretation, critical analysis, and fused it into a solution that's designed to address a true need, but then to unfold it, and it's the key thing, to unfold it at the behest of the individual's problem. What's your goal? What's your problem? The AI, the co-pilots that we're building, identify that and build off its intelligence to focus on achieving a goal by solving the problem.
Which, again, is a much more interesting way of looking at it. I think linking back to what you were saying before, it almost like seems the problems of SEN were money. It seems like the problems of technology are sort of also money, because they're building these solutions to a singular problem with probably the aim of creating a startup around it or creating a product and then selling it to maybe a big, conglomerate or something that will eat it up, you'll get a payday and then sort of move on, which, like you said, doesn't solve your goals. It just solves maybe a momentary problem that you have at that point based on a singular amount of data that you've collected from some basic form of research that you've done. We know that 100,000 people experience this problem, so we'll tackle this one problem rather than looking at, like you said, that holistic view of everything else.
The challenge between being performative and being affirmative, and I think this is one of the, from my interpretation, and I talk about this quite a lot, especially in conversations one-to-one, and I say, look, society today is going through a very silent dilemma, which is, what persona do you want to be? Do you want to be the performer, where you're there and you're doing things because people think they like it and it's not fulfilling an impactful narrative, but your impact is benefit from? Or do you want affirmative? Do you want to do it in a way where you're looking at all these other things? You want to move diligently, you want to be more objective than subjective, and to be diligent in your approach, all right? You apply that advanced thinking, as I mentioned. And so what you described there is that challenge between being performative and being affirmative. Performative is, as you mentioned, let's build a company, let's get off these vibes, let's grow it, let's get VC funding, let's hit the social media, let's be the Silicon Valley rock stars, as they'll call it. And then we're gonna sell out, and then we're gonna be good. But what impact have we made? What have you left? What have you done? What's your mark on society that you've made? So with us, we're more affirmative. We say, look, we know there's a big problem. In fact, we've modelled the problem, not just in its entirety, but modelled for it to be disproven and then changed and then varied and expanded and all these things there. We want this to work, but we're also aware that this may not work. And that's brilliant, because it means that we can build something better, because we're affirmative within this. So us being affirmative within this, it's a case of, let's not determine what the problems are. Why don't we invite the people to determine these problems? Why don't we actually say, let's build something very simple that's designed to help us, but designed to listen to us. What problems are you facing? How can I help you? When is the last time anyone's actually asked you those things as a service, as a product? Yeah, you can go and get a consultant and it's there, but as a product, what is your problem? How can I help you? And then let that story, like I said in the beginning, the diversity of people, let those stories dictate the narrative. That's true inclusion, because it's inclusion through dissociation, diversity. It spreads out, it turns into what we would see as kind of like the nervous system in our brain and our whole makeup, because that's what it should be.
And it's, which is a very fluid way of looking at technology, I suppose, as well.
It's fluid and it's risk adverse, because essentially if you're building technology that's designed to evolve in alignment to the user itself, it means product market fit will always be a thing, because the market is
it takes the product, yeah.
Exactly. The product adapts and evolves to suit the user. And then the beauty of it is that once those products start to adapt and evolve, all those systems, all those intelligences can also be called in like a unimind and say, right, we're not just building to sort of one person. That model can now be used as a reference for another person that may have very similar attributes, so we can support them more easier and differentiate much sooner. So again, it's all about creating this ecosystem. And I think the whole ecosystem approach to building any type of business, any type of venture, is one of the most impactful, most sustainable forms, but it requires that type of person has a very special holistic mindset, that advanced thinker that doesn't just think of, I want to go from here to here, it's because I want to do that. Because I've got all of this and all of this through collaboration and complementing existing systems, existing devices, existing solutions, existing people, processes, frameworks. It means we will always exist. It means we will never die. It becomes eternal because it becomes with us and for us.
Amazing. Can you think of any, not anything that you've modelled this off, but any companies that are maybe, or any other products that are taking more of this approach?
It's interesting because a lot of companies that are taking this approach, like I said, Red Hat is definitely one that, kind of set this whole open source trend, this whole attribution trend. And like I said, these are all concepts that I've always grew up in since childhood, but my mentor kind of just took those and engaged it into what's actually happening in innovation and business. And so, look at how OpenAI has exploded, because their models are open source. And now look what they're doing. They're now building models that are designed to do the very thing that we're building towards, which is essentially kind of sit and to interpret canonical data from our entire footprint. What you feed to it becomes you, and so on and so forth. The only issue is, how do you solve the data issue? How do you ensure that the information, even though it's open source, if it's open source, then how do you ensure that data sovereignty and data provenance is put into play? How do you really fulfill impact by not just providing a solution, but a solution that is ethically designed and ethically aligned to people, that embraces the diversity rather than tries to constrict them into certain barriers in certain groups that they may not want to be in, but they're forced to be in.
Wow. And I mean, data sovereignty is definitely something I want to talk about, but I think before we do, it would be good to almost peek behind the curtain a little bit with the AI that you're talking about, Achille. So what does a person-centered AI like Achille, what does that actually look like in practice?
So Achille is built to, like I said, turn into kind of like a micro ecosystem of agents that works around the user. For what we're building now, not to go into too much depth into it, not just because of the complexities, but also to kind of protect the development we're doing, because it's still very much at an experimental stage. But the models that we've been building is designed to build this agentic workflow that says, we're going to define all these different roles that are created to serve the purpose of fulfilling the goal set by the user. But that goal has to be coordinated by an agent before it recruits, develops, and kind of grows a community of agents, a swarm. And so what we're building effectively is a coordination agent that is going to be defined by some of the newest advanced reasoning models. So models such as OpenAI O3, what was O1, you've got O3 and O4, you've got certain models of Claude, you've got certain models of Llama, which is Meta. Essentially AI that can reason, because the difference with those types of agents is that any reasoning LLM, you can actually define its context based on definitions. So rather than build all these massive databases and these huge number of agents that are going to be very costly and very cumbersome to build and deploy, and therefore the definition of building MVP is build fast, build lean, use as very little complexity into your product, so you just get into your market as quick as possible, and then leverage your growth and expansion through market engagement. So what we're building is a very advanced coordination agent that is designed and trained to interpret through conversations with the user definitions of support, but also it can retrieve information from other sources, from councils, from their workplace, from schools, from healthcare, from the wider internet, and interpret what the user needs as support and what support is there, to then define the support cost and support services that are logically aligned to suit the user's needs. So that coordination agent is there to set the scene, but to provide value at the very beginning. Once the scenes are set and there's going to be a explosion of different variances, we then build the agentic workflows and the swarm to suit those frameworks that are being differentiated by these coordination agents.
Wow. Okay. So breaking that down a little bit further. So if you're so let's say you're a neurodivergent, let's say kid in this case, because we're talking about SEN, but it could be, someone in, like you said, a workplace or anywhere else. So you're experiencing troubles with your neurodiversity. You aren't getting support through normal methods, through your work methods, through anywhere else. So obviously you're turning to this type of solution. So if I'm understanding this correctly, you'll have almost an AI agent that will be able to work with that person to understand what their problems are in their environment.
In their the context is set by their experiences.
Wow. Okay. So is conversational? Is that in the form of like a therapy session?
It's through conversations, like just gradual check-ins, no more than we always say. And the way we've modeled it is it's got to be like through micro interventions. So no more than 15 minutes a day collectively, where this agent will come and it will check in like how you feeling today, what's going on, and then also it learns from those interactions. So not just interactions through conversation or interactions through any generated interventions that it's going to deliver that coincides with the response of the user, but also it's learning from, for example, if they're struggling to go through these emails, it learns from the emails. It's learning from the diary. It's also learning from, the interactions of other people. So one of the things that we're looking into is if, for example, you've got two people or a collection of people that all have their own agents, those conversations, those engagements are also tracked. So it's about kind of learning from interactions and experiences with other people to kind of coincide with their story. So you're basically building individualized timelines that it's learning from, that it's structuring its own knowledge from. And the whole parameter of that, the whole purpose, the whole directive is, how do I support my user from all these experiences? And then how do I engage that user to help interpret the challenges they have if the agent's not able to interpret themselves? And then the more information through those interpretations and through the dialogue with other individuals and the dialogue with other agents as well, and data sources, how do you then predictively model those interventions that would be required, so it becomes more of a preventative element rather than a reactive element? Because like I say, prevention is better than cure. So if we can build up this intellect, build up this support intelligence to be more proactive, then the gains are going to be quite remarkable, because the whole methodology of these coordination agents is built on the whole marginal gains principle that is set by Sir Dave Brailsford. It's like that 1%, those little things, each every single day. If you improve these little things, it builds up to a wider element of development, a wider element of impact.
Which is, okay, that's really interesting. So you're almost infiltrating AI in, like you mentioned before, as a second brain. So it's integrated within your life. So you're using it, maybe how people use it already. I use AI for a lot of different things, writing and image creation, but obviously it will be injected into those things. It will probably be injected into things that maybe you aren't using AI for, but it's obviously collating and collecting a lot of this data on you.
Absolutely.
So it can provide and create and liaise with other agents, with other support methods, a personalized plan, like you said, to try and get in there before you make the mistakes that your neurodiversity is going to create.
Exactly, yeah. And this is where that is the genius behind it, because the context is defined by the experience of the individual. And if you can define the experience of individuals and collate them continuously, then you're building what I like to call small language models that are built on each individual that can learn from each agent, and then the swarm becomes much more fortified in the knowledge of human development.
Okay, so I can see why you're saying enhancing the human element. So I suppose this naturally leads on to, so you're collecting a lot of data, and we talked about data sovereignty, and you're going to be having a lot of data on personalized individuals, and obviously we live in a world now where there is quite a lot of data misuse. There's algorithmic misuse as well, algorithmic harm, especially. So how are you approaching all of that? Trust in AI, making sure that it's trustworthy, data sovereignty, and making sure that the design and all of these elements are neuro-inclusive as well.
So, this is one of the non-negotiables for us as an organisation, and again, the philosophy that I've mentioned earlier. Neurodivergent people have been overobserved, underheard, and so we have to flip that dynamic. And so let's look at the user-first data principles: ownership, consent. We need to ensure that we can build trust in what our system's doing by ensuring that the information that it is fed into it is not only secured, it's theirs. which is where the sovereignty element comes into play. You know, if you are confident that the knowledge, the information, your life has been, your consciousness has been fed into these systems, then to own it, then you'd want to do it. But then it goes to the next point. If you own it, and this is something that we're looking into, and I will say this as a disclaimer, no clear data management backend has been chosen, because we wanted to be very transient in this, because we've looked at blockchain technologies, and there's other ones that are out there, and there are certain technologies like blockchain that are controversial. And so obviously we don't want to be a bit too disruptive where, you know, we're building a solution that people just wouldn't trust because there are negative connotations in the technology that has been abused in retrospect. But essentially we're looking at in terms of, if we want to empower people to use our system, we also need to look at how to incentivize them as well. So, you know, GDPR exists because data misuse became industrial, all right? The small amount of companies were profiteering the largest amounts by using our data without our consent. But it needs to go to another distance to say, okay, well, if you're going to profit from it, why don't you just unlock the profitability to everyone, that whole attribution element? So the more you use it, the more the system benefits, the more we can build better solutions, the more we're going to make money. Well, why don't we share that money with you? Why don't we incentivize you? Why don't we say, yo, you can actually make a side hustle out of using applications. Dare I say, you can make a career out of utilizing applications to build better services, which is where the attribution element comes into play. You know, if you can use this to basically design a service and feed your consciousness, feed your, you know, intelligence, your application of knowledge into the system so someone else benefits from it, you should be paid for it. And it should be done very seamlessly. You know, so there's that element. You know, in our solution, one of the key things that we don't want to do is we don't want to have any data extraction. We don't have ad targeting, and there's no silent surveillance. We're very clear in terms of what we're doing. So we'll do engagements, webinars, we'll go into institutions, we'll go into workplaces, we'll engage with people to basically document what we're doing. One of the things that my CTO and I are even thinking about doing is, in our design sessions, let's record them, let's put them on YouTube. Let's make it transparent. Let's actually show the world what we're doing, because we need to build that trust, knowing that we're not a faceless corporation that is ring-fenced to 1% of the people out there that live in a particular part of the world, preferably in Silicon Valley, that you don't know, you don't have access to, and therefore there's misuse. We literally, like, look at me. I don't fit the typical narrative of a tech CEO. I do see this being a unicorn. But let's invite everyone to be part of that journey. You know, so we really want to have that. And so some of the future plans we have is building like data co-ops, you know, how to build that data governance, decentralized data governance, so that people out there, you know, experts in different fields within not just neurodiversity inclusion, but any element of, you know, human development, can feed in and to provide that governance of how these systems, how this intelligence is collated and managed. So they're involved in a whole governance element. You know, we're also looking at in terms of portable neuroprofiles, you know, how users can own the intelligence that they help train. As I mentioned, you know, this intelligence can be constructed into courses, can be constructed into types of interventions, could be information that we can use to build better solutions, or better yet, a data platform that has anonymized information so that research institutions, other developers, other companies can actually tap into that network, tap into these resources as research, and actually develop solutions on the back of real data fed by real people in abundance.
So if I'm understanding that correctly, you're saying, so if I'm using my own example here, again, I have ADHD myself. So if I utilize this, I fed it my data, I managed to work with the AI in a way that created a solution that helped me navigate my life, made my life, let's say, 33% easier, which I'm all for. And then those solutions were part of this whole system, part of this whole network, then went on to help maybe, 50,000 other people, and then was also put in a learning system that went on to help more people, was also used for research, was also used for a couple of other different things. I would start seeing revenue streams from all of those in terms of all of those,
because essentially that is your attribution.
Mm.
So
it's almost intellectual property in a way.
It's your intellectual property, because that's our system, our ecosystem wouldn't have benefited from your experience, from your contribution towards it, your continued contribution towards it. So this is where the whole data sovereignty element comes to play. And the data provenance is important, because we need to also be able to say, okay, well, if that person received that support or was fed in, we need to be able to track and monitor where it came from. So that whole element of having smart contracts. So your story that has helped to enable all these different innovations that have benefited society, and there is a monetary value towards it. Then it's say, oh, you contributed to this amount, so we've unitized this. Here's the incentive for this. So if we're going to incentivize you, then you're going to use it more and more and more and more. So everyone wins from this. And again, this is where the whole ecosystem play really benefits as a sustainable solution.
Amazing. I mean, that could be very interesting, very revolutionary, really, because it's people are very used to, like we said, data mistrust. You're having to decline all cookies now. I think most people are a lot more conscious around how their data is being misused. I think neurodiverse people are probably also quite used to being misused in that certain way. So it's very good that you're creating a very open environment to be able to profit and benefit from that, and it gives people incentive to do so. So was this always the goal in mind? Because obviously you mentioned earlier that you've rebuilt FullSpektrum quite a few times. You've now got to a point where you've got a very clear focus. What did you learn, I suppose, from that failure specifically? I
think what I learned is that before you can build anything, you got to understand and really analyze yourself. You got to basically do your own SWOT analysis, identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats, and then build teams that are an extension of you, but also complement you. So I didn't do that correctly. I think the first couple of times was building teams built on people that I knew. And that's not a good way of doing things. Okay, yeah, you may have to do it. And that's traditionally how these, garage shed startups normally, occur. But they were in communities that they had talented people with various skills in abundance. Whereas in communities I'm from, we don't. And if we want to get into those communities or access them, we come at a premium. So the key thing that I had to learn was identify what you can do, identify what you like doing, identify what you don't like doing, and identify what you just are incapable of doing. And you build your team, you profile yourself and build your team off the complementary profiles that are designed to complement it and build it out. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's a marathon, not a sprint, but you have to sprint. And so if you're going to build a solution, yeah, you want to have impact, you want to have a big goal, get there, but you have to set yourself up as a business. You have to make revenue. You have to prove the concept of your business works. And before thinking about the technology, think about the solution, think about the engagement, think about the individual. Think about what is it, how you're going to work with them, and be able to leverage traction through that engagement, through that camaraderie that you have with people that are going to be your advocates, your evangelists, that you then will depend on to go through those early developmental stages of your business. And the third thing is take time for yourself. This is my passion. As you probably can see, I'm quite passionate about this, but if you spoke to me about this last year, my passion would have been too much. It would have been uncontrolled. I have had to work on myself quite a lot over the past 6 months, especially up here, to really get myself to the point where I can regulate not just myself, but my environment. Because I've said this a number of times, if you want the best from me, I need the best around me, but you need to also be the best for you. And so as an entrepreneur, it's very easy to neglect yourself to fulfill your vision because of the challenges that we face. It's one of the most difficult careers to do because essentially you're building something out of nothing. But always take time for yourself, always put yourself first and address that balance, because the better you can fix this and all of that, the better you can build, the better you can lead, the better you can make an impact. Because it's all part of this balance that we as human beings, we are the custodians to protect that balance. And anything that happens to us, that dysregulation within, internally and externally, is caused by our misinterpretation of our true purpose.
Which I suppose almost these AI agents that you mentioned can almost help with, because if they know that that's your internal balance and that's what keeps your sort of bedrock stable, then they can help you within your life.
To be very honest with you, I wouldn't be the person I am now, the person I'm here today. And we were meant to have this conversation a while ago and I stopped for this reason, because I had to take a break. And during that break, I got into botland. I want to be who I am now. I want to have rebuilt FullSpektrum the way it is, how focused it is. I want to have had this mentality of balance if I didn't do it without AI. AI literally not just rebuilt FullSpektrum and helped me build a new company and a new consultancy. It's helped to rebuild me, because now all the nonsense, all the admin, all the stuff that I'll struggle at in executive function, those daily struggles that I had that was making it difficult for me to be a CEO or be a founder of any type, to the point where people saying, you're not CEO. I built bots that represent me, that can do the stuff that I don't want to do or can't do, so I can focus on things that I love to do and I can do. And therefore that balance is there. So I'm using Achille. This is what has made me thrive. And so it's that whole notion that really is exploded AI today. You use AI to build better AI, but also using AI to build better versions of us.
Yeah, that's, and again, I can speak as a sort of fellow founder. It enhances my workflow as well. It's something that I use to be able to do what I maybe couldn't do as a one-man band. That's how I'm operating at the moment. It allows me to maybe operate the capacity of a couple of people or a team of people, because I'm able to put different AIs and different subject matters, have a market researcher, have all of these other elements, which is really useful. So I suppose on the final question, where do you see like the end point for this? Where do you see the end point of FullSpektrum and Achille in the future?
Achille is the first of a long line of solutions that we'll be building. Achille is the foundational solution, because what we try to build, the whole send improvement, send transformation dialogue with FS1 as a management platform for services in the public and private sector, that will follow, because that solution can't be built until we've got a network of agents and this data that exists out there, the support intelligence, in order to build support intelligence solutions. So Achille is pretty much developing and anchoring the support intelligence concept that will follow. What's next? I mean, we're about to enter a fundraise right now, so we're raising not much, but about 250,000, so we can actually get to the whole beta stage. We expect to be deploying our beta build by this time next year. Could be sooner. We're quite aggressive in terms of how we build this. And then essentially the way we see it is the next 3 years is for this entire solution to be proven and deployed at global scale. And then once we do, who knows what comes next? We're very ambitious with our goals, but at the same time, we're very measured with them. Because I think one of the key things that we don't want to happen is unbound, undisciplined ambition to be exploited. And I do feel that the mistakes that I've made before, my ambition, but my ill discipline was exploited. And therefore it doesn't work this time around. It can't, because one of the key things that we want to build this business to become is resilient. And by doing that, you have to break it down to the bare basics, be lean, really lean, be agile, but be focused. And like I said, defend the philosophies that you have implemented. Nothing can change that. And we will not work with anyone that doesn't align with the philosophies that we've now set within this organization.
Amazing. So it's, again, clarity of focus, enhancement by AI, and hopefully a very bright future. Because I mean, I know I'll definitely be keeping an eye, because it sounds really, really exciting.
And even very quickly as well. Like I said, we've been it's only now, and like I said, this conversation has been delayed strategically, because we're now starting to very subtly reveal what we're doing. We've been in stealth mode for the longest time, but being very subtle and very strategic in our approach. So look out for it, and there's more to come.
Amazing. Well, where should we direct people to? Our
websites have been left down for the longest time, but it will be brought back up next month, so during May. So our website is now FullSpektrum, so FullSpektrum, all one word, .ai. So that is going to be our main website, but then you can find me on all social media platforms. I'm more active on LinkedIn, we're also on Instagram as well. And more and more in terms of what we're doing will be revealed. But as you can imagine, we've been very concealed with what we do and very selective, which is why I'm thank you for allowing me to come share my story and share our innovation today. this is probably the first, not of many, but of selected ones to kind of show in terms of what we're doing and where we're going.
Amazing. Well, hopefully, I'll be keeping an eye on those moving forward as well. But I also want to say a big thank you for coming on today. It's been a fascinating insight into, I think, what is possible with things like this and AI moving forward, which is sort of the whole premise of the show, discussing new approaches. So I will say everyone for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, follow, whatever you've got to do on any platform. We'll be having loads more episodes coming your way very soon. Remember to follow André on all of those different platforms that you just mentioned. And we will be hopefully expanding the conversations. If you've got any questions around what we've discussed today, around AI, around FullSpektrum, around neurodiversity, the combination of all of those as well, leave them in the comments below. What I want to do with this is maybe even eventually circle back around, ask those questions directly, have a follow-up, and again, continue the conversation forward from there, really. So have a great rest of your day, everyone else, everyone viewing, and goodbye for now.